California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Hello everybody, I'm Huell, and here we are at the Golden State Bonsai Collection South, which is located in the magnificent Huntington Botanical Gardens near Pasadena. Now these are some of the finest examples of little bonsai trees you'll find anywhere in our state. I mean, look at these wonderful little trees, the way they're cut and manicured. You could just stand here and look at them forever. But as beautiful as these little bonsais are, that's not what we're looking for on this particular adventure, because we're getting ready to go in search of big trees in California, and I mean really big trees. And I think we've found 3 of the biggest in the entire state. If you're curious what kind of trees they are and where they're located, you're invited to come on along with us on this adventure as we continue our search together for California's gold. To get to our first big tree, we headed north from LA, up the coast on good old Highway 101. Our destination was beautiful and historic Santa Barbara. Now, we'd heard from very reliable sources they had a big tree. And sure enough, we found it. Okay, we have arrived here in Santa Barbara, and our quest for big trees has begun. And boy, are we starting off with a big one right here. Look at the size of this tree. Here to tell us about it, introduce yourself to everybody.
Dan Condon, and I'm the city arborist with the city of Santa Barbara.
The city arborist, which means you're in charge of all the trees in Santa Barbara.
All the public trees, right.
Well, now this is a public tree, and it's a big one.
Certainly is.
Tell us about this tree.
Well, it's the Moreton Bay Fig Tree, and we believe it's the largest in the continental United States, at least.
Wait a minute, it's the largest in the continental United States.
Right. There may be one bigger in Hawaii.
But that's not the continental United States.
That's right. So this is the largest. It was planted in 1876, a block away from here, which we may want to walk and see where it was. And then it was moved here by a little girl who was the friend of the girl who planted it in their front yard. It was given to her by a sailor as a seedling, a sailor from Australia, from native to Australia. And then a year later they moved away, so they gave it to their girlfriend, and she planted it over here. This was privately owned property at the time, 1877, and then it was later bought by the Southern Pacific Railroad Company, and for decades this was owned by the railroad. And then the city of Santa Barbara actually just took it over several years ago, and as part of the remodeling of the whole railroad depot here, made a lot of improvements to the actual grounds around the tree. But it's 170 feet in branch spread from one side.
The size of this thing.
Like a giant mushroom, 170 feet, 80 feet tall.
And it's the largest in the continental United States.
Yes.
Now, these fig trees are native to Australia?
That's right. Yeah.
But they seem to be doing just fine here in Southern California.
Oh yeah, this is one of dozens that we have here in Santa Barbara on both public and private property. Probably the oldest and certainly the biggest of all of those.
Now, how fast does this thing grow? Because it's been here for 125 years.
That's right.
And it looks like it's in great condition. I mean, it looks really healthy.
It is in good condition for its age. There's no question about that. We have, as I said, we've made some improvements here. We actually narrowed the street about 4 years ago as part of this depot project to try and give the tree more rooting area on the east side there. You can see that most of the tree is this way into the park.
Boy, now when you talk about roots,
there's some serious roots here.
There are some very serious roots. I don't think I've ever seen roots like this before. Look how high up they are.
Well, this is actually a characteristic of the the genus Ficus. All fig trees belong. This is a relative of the edible fig. It does produce figs. Here's one right by on that leaf by your foot there.
Yeah,
see it?
Okay.
Little,
so they actually make figs.
Birds eat them. Those are you're familiar. We all familiar with the edible figs. These are edible for birds. They're not much good for humans, but it produces thousands of these every year. And these roots, this kind of surface buttress root, it's actually an outgrowth of trunk tissue. It is physiologically different from the root tissues that are in the soil. This is actually an above ground surface. They're called buttress roots, but they're really, you can see that they're an outgrowth.
It looks like
of
part of the trunk.
It really is.
Look at these things. I've never seen roots that go up this high before. But
we have some sort of a little memorial here, looks like, or some sort of a little, somebody's left that there.
Somebody brought by some flowers.
I brought some flowers. They knew you were coming to town, you know.
Do the people in Santa Barbara, have they really taken to this tree? Obviously they have.
Not only the people in Santa Barbara, people from all over the country. If you say, meet me at the fig tree to some homeless person in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm quoting Newsweek magazine from 1984, they say, okay, we'll meet you at the fig tree. They know that means come to Santa Barbara by the railroad station, because this fig tree is that well known. In fact, in those years, in 84, 85, the homeless people, in order to register to vote, tried to establish this as their mailing address. They put a little mailbox over on, with red, white, and blue mailbox on the street over here. Of course, the post office refused to deliver to a tree.
Wow, but I'll tell you what, if they were going to, this one is big enough to deliver to.
You can see there's numerous rooms here, numerous compartments. There's living room and dining room.
People would actually live here. Homeless would sleep here.
Yes, they would.
Is the tree still growing?
You bet. The tree's still growing. We, in fact, we still prune this tree, just like you would prune any other tree. We prune this about every 3 years, primarily to reduce some of the end weight on these big lateral branches.
Yeah,
a branch that size will weigh several tons, if not over 10,000 pounds for a limb that size, because if you ever take a little chunk of this, a small piece of this firewood and try to hold it out here, you won't be holding it out there too long.
Yeah.
And look at the spread. Well, if it's 170 feet, you're out here.
Look
60.
at this limb over here.
Yeah.
This is a huge limb right here. You would have to prune it to keep it from falling.
Well, yeah, to keep it from drooping, they will, for one thing, they will droop right to the ground. And so you have to keep some ground clearance. But we do it primarily now to just thin the ends and reduce some of that end weight on the branches without altering the spread of the tree significantly, and thereby prevent limb breakage. Because in a windstorm, if you're ever here if you're ever in Santa Barbara in a windstorm, come down here and stand under the fig tree and just watch these gigantic limbs. Just with the amount of movement that's in them, it's amazing. I mean, they look pretty sturdy and solid, but they're dynamic. They're moving and growing all the time, as you said.
Howdy, ladies. How you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Well, are you painting the fig tree
Yeah,
today?
and I tell you, it must be the hardest challenge I've ever had.
Why do you say that? Let's take a look at it.
Because I'm just concentrating on the tree, and it's really, you get lost in it. You know, and there are so much dark and light to do and so much
Well,
stuff.
it's a big tree.
It is, and it's so beautiful. It's very musical.
What do you mean musical?
It doesn't have any hard line. It's all, you know, very...
It's flowing.
It's flowing, exactly, exactly.
Well, it's a big tree. We're not disappointed. That's what we were in search of. We've got more big trees to find, but this one has certainly fit the bill. It's the Moreton Fig Tree.
Moreton Bay Fig Tree.
Moreton Bay Fig Tree. And give us the statistics on it again.
170 feet in branch spread, 80 feet tall, and the trunk diameter is 12.5 feet in diameter of the trunk. Yes.
It's a big tree, and it's alive and well and still growing strong here in Santa Barbara. It is a beautiful tree, too, and a nice day here to look at it. After seeing Santa Barbara's fig tree, we were filled with anticipation as we headed for our next big tree. a tree located in Riverside County, about 65 miles south of L.A. We were heading for Temecula. Specifically, we were heading for the ranch once owned by Erle Stanley Gardner, the famous author who wrote all those Perry Mason novels. Now, we'd heard there was a big tree on his old ranch, and at first we drove right by it, didn't even see it, because at first it didn't look like a single big tree. But eventually we turned around and found it, and were not disappointed. Okay, we have arrived here at, the name of this place again is?
Rancho del Paisano.
Better introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm Jeff Lofke, the ranch manager.
The ranch manager of this wonderful rancho, which for years belonged to Erle Stanley Gardner, who among other things wrote over 80 Perry Mason novels. He's one of California's great writers. And here on this rancho in Temecula is the Great Oak. In front of you stands the largest California live oak, which is called?
Quercus agrifolia.
In the world. It stands 96 feet tall with a trunk circumference of 20 feet and a spread circumference of 590 feet, the largest of any indigenous oak tree in the United States. It is estimated to be 800 years old.
That's right.
Now this must really catch people's, well actually when you drive by it, it doesn't look like a tree.
No, people drive up to the ranch house and say, well, where's this big tree you've been bragging about? And I says, you drove past it. They said, you mean that grove of trees? I says, no, that's one single tree. And these statistics that you just read are very impressive, but you'll notice the date is June 99. This is a living organism. It's grown since this was put in.
Let's go inside and take a look, because it is amazing to walk in here and see this tree.
Huell, this is not just a tree, this is a cathedral, as you can see.
Look at this. I don't think I have ever seen anything like this before in my life.
Well, there's nothing like it anywhere.
Now, when you have people who know what they're talking about come in here, what do they tell you about it?
Well, several arborists have come in, and professional tree surgeons, and they just get all excited, and they thought they found the Holy Grail when they come in here. I mean, they just come back, they'll come and have lunch here just so they can be by it and have reverence for the tree.
Look at this. Look how the limbs, I think this is what's so unusual about it, is the way the limbs come down.
They come down and grow back up, and it's just like a whole new community in here.
It's like we're in a forest, and we are literally, this whole time we're walking around here, we are under one tree.
One tree. It's amazing, isn't it? It's the easiest tree in the world to climb, too. You just start scooting up the limbs, and pretty soon you're up in the top.
Look at this. Do you have lots of kids coming over here to climb the tree?
Oh, yes. We have 6th grade camp here, and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts come out, and they just love this tree. I mean, they just stay here all week if you let them.
Now, so you have lights up here, too.
Oh, yes. It's really a fun place to have square dances at night.
So you have square dances under the tree?
Oh, yeah, under the tree. We've had weddings here, and the balloon flights that come over Temecula, when they land out here in the field, this is where they come pop the champagne for a successful flight. It's just really a great place.
Do we know anything about its history as far as the Native Americans were concerned?
They held it in reverence, and they often had ceremonies under the tree, and Father Sarah came by here and stopped and had a meeting with the Native Americans.
That's documented.
It's documented.
And he met under this tree.
Under this tree.
And how healthy is the old tree?
Well, it's so healthy that in the last 10 years it grew a foot in circumference around the trunk.
Really?
I've had to move the road 3 times because it keeps growing out and out and out. It grows about 1.5 feet a year outward from the trunk, the spread does.
And listen with the wind blowing. Let's just stand for a second and listen to this tree.
You notice how much cooler it is here than it was outside?
Yeah.
This tree trans-evaporates about 10,000 gallons of water a day, and so it's just like a big swamp cooler, so it's much cooler in here. It's as much as 20 degrees cooler here on a hot day than it is outside.
Do you do anything to take care of it?
occasional little cosmetic pruning and treating of the wounds, but basically it just grows on its own.
And it just keeps growing. Look at this. Look how this just keeps growing out, out. It just keeps going, and to the person outside, it does look like just a lot of shrubbery here instead of a tree.
It does. It looks like a lot of little trees growing around a big tree, but it's all one mother tree.
We have a visitor here. I guess he's one of many little critters that call this tree home.
Oh, lots of critters do. We have owl nest and a hawk nest in this tree. We had a beehive for years up here in this split, but eventually the tree grew and closed off the split, and the bees lost their home, and so there's honey locked down inside that limb.
Look how big these trunks are going all the way up.
Yeah.
You would think that over the years the wind would have gotten to it, or age would have gotten to it, that somehow or another it would have split and fallen apart.
What amazes me is this is in a floodplain, and it got big enough to withstand the floods and be able to survive, because a lot of the little trees get washed away. So it just was very lucky when it sprouted and not have a major flood until it got big enough to support itself.
Do many people know about this tree?
Well, more and more, as there's been articles in the paper and things, but most people don't know. A lot of people come to town and lived here for 10, 15 years and don't even know it's here.
Well, it's here.
It's here.
And it's here in a big way. The largest oak tree.
California live oak.
The California live oak, the largest one anywhere
in the world.
This is a wonderful, wonderful place just to stand and enjoy the beauty and the sounds of this big old tree.
It is. It's a world all to itself.
Our final stop in search of big trees took us to the nice little town of Sanger in Fresno County. Actually, we were heading about 45 miles out of Sanger on Highway 180. Our destination, Kings Canyon National Park. Now, just getting to the park took us through an amazing variety of terrain. But we could definitely tell when we were getting close to the park, because the trees kept getting bigger and bigger. But in reality, nothing could prepare us for the big tree we were about to visit. Well, I'm standing here with Ranger Kathy Purchase. And Kathy, exactly where are we right now?
We're in the Grant Grove area of Kings Canyon National Park.
And you've heard, I guess, why we are here.
Well, I understand you're looking for some big trees, and if you can't find them here, you're not looking very hard.
And you don't have to look very far, because we're standing right beside one of these huge sequoia trees. Tell us just a little bit about the sequoias.
Well, the giant sequoias are the biggest trees in the world. They can live up to 3,000 years. An average one is 15 to 20 feet across, 250 to 300 feet high.
Now, wait a minute. They can live 1,500 to 2,000 years?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and the oldest one that we know about, we only know how old it was because it was chopped down. It could still have lived for hundreds of years more after that.
These are amazing things, just to stand here in the shadow of these trees and look up and see them. And we're standing right beside a perfect example that shows firsthand how big these old trees are. Let's go inside, because Kathy, this tree has a story to it.
This tree was lying on the ground when white people first came to this area. The first people who came to the Grant Grove area used it as a saloon and hotel for early tourists before the Park Service came along.
A saloon and hotel?
Yeah. In 1890, when this was set aside as a national park, the cavalry came in and used it to stable their horses in rainy weather.
So this tree has been laying here on its side, hollowed out, for how long?
We don't know. Over 150 years.
Wow. Look at this. And we have been walking through the tree the whole time we've been in here.
Yeah, and this is just an average size sequoia. This isn't a particularly large one.
And look at this, when you look down, you're looking, I mean, you get an idea of just how big around this tree is.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers on this one, but it's quite large.
Now it's been burned up in here.
That could have happened while it was still alive. Giant sequoias evolved with fire, and fire was a very major part of the forest up until the time that white people came in here.
And there's graffiti carved in here, and I bet some of this graffiti is historic too.
Well, yeah, if you come over here, almost exactly a year ago, September 17th, 1885.
Wow. Well, Kathy, as interesting and historic as this big old fallen hollow tree is, and I think you call it the
Fallen monarch.
The fallen monarch, we are here specifically to visit a tree that's located right across the grove here. Give us the facts and figures and stats on that big old tree.
Well, that's the General Grant tree. It's the third largest tree in the world and the largest here in the Grant Grove. At the base, it's 40 feet across, which is bigger than most of the tour buses that come into our visitor center. It's 267 feet tall, or the height of a 27-story building.
Goodness.
And we estimate this is a fairly young tree. We think it's only between 1,600 and 2,000 years.
Only 1,600 to 2,000 years old. It's a magnificent tree in its own right, but there's another story to the old General Grant tree. And here to fill us in on that is our new friend from the Sanger Chamber of Commerce, Dan Spears. Dan, tell us the other claim to fame of this big old tree.
Well, this is the nation's Christmas tree. Not the national tree you see in Washington, but the nation's Christmas tree.
Now, how did that come about?
Well, the story starts back in 1924 when Charles E. Lee, who was the secretary of the Sanger Chamber of Commerce, was standing at the base of that tree, and a little girl beside him said, "What a lovely Christmas tree that would make." Well, he agreed, and he wrote the president at the time, Calvin Coolidge, and requested that the U.S. government designate this as the Christmas tree for the nation, and the president did that in 1926.
So before that, we didn't have an official nation's Christmas tree.
That's correct. This
and
is
since then, this has been the one and only.
This is it, and I believe it'll always stay that way, and it's a very fitting subject for a nation's Christmas tree.
You know, it's one thing to see this tree from a distance. It's another when you get up close to it. It is the most spectacular thing I've ever seen, and I'm just wondering if most Californians even know that this is our nation's Christmas tree.
I'd have to answer no, Huell. In fact, even in Sanger, which is the nation's Christmas tree city, we've undertaken a program to educate all of our children as they're growing up. Every third grader is brought up to this tree and taught about the significance of the nation's Christmas tree to their city, the nation's Christmas tree city of Sanger.
Don't you have, well, I know you have a Christmas ceremony here every year where you bus people out and have a little program right here under the tree?
People come from all over the world, literally. And every December, the second Sunday in December, we have what's called the Trek to the Nation's Christmas Tree. And we do gather beneath the great limbs of the giant sequoia, and we celebrate Christmas and also honor our nation's war dead.
Wow, I've seen photographs and film of that ceremony. We've been trying to come to that ceremony for over 10 years now. We finally gave up on ever trying to make that, but we wanted to stop and see it now, and I don't think it really makes any difference what time of year you see it.
Anytime.
It is a spectacular tree.
It's one of those trees that's beautiful in every season.
Well, it's a spectacular tree. You are to be commended for being good stewards
Well,
of all of these beautiful trees. I guess they never cease to amaze the people who visit these parks.
Oh yeah, I mean, I come up here a couple times a week, and it's an amazing place to be, just to walk around and be in the presence of these giant trees.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's been our adventure in search of big trees here in California. We found a big old oak tree, a big old fig tree, and we finally ended up here in front of this magnificent old sequoia tree, 27 stories high, 1,600 to 2,000 years old. It is a wonderful, magnificent thing to stand here in its presence and just marvel at the size and the age and the beauty of this tree. A tree that is not only our nation's Christmas tree, but a fine example of California's gold. Goodbye, everybody. Well, hello everybody. I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.